Hello, I am Bruno Bergmans, the Vice Chair of the MDS Young Members Group Steering Committee, and I'm here to interview Kevin van den Berg, who is an MD and PhD candidate at the Radboud University Medical Center in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. And I will interview him about his work, which was recently selected as an MDS Young Member Research Highlight of the Month for the month of February. So I think it's a very interesting paper about tremor in Parkinson's disease. And I would first like to ask you what made you interested in this research.
Well, good afternoon, Bruno. Also, the rest of the people listening. I would first of all, on behalf of all the co-authors, I'd like to thank you so much for selecting our paper, and we're really grateful for this opportunity. And I'm really happy to talk about this. And your question was, what made me interested in this? Well, it actually started out quite early. My mother is a Parkinson specialist nurse, and my father is a physiotherapist. So something about neurology and disorders related to movement was always something that I was super interested about. And when I was in med school, I met Rick Helmich, who's a researcher neurologist at Radboud University Medical Center. And together with him, you were able to do a research internship for me abroad at Mark Hallett's lab at the National Institutes of Health, where I researched re-emergent tremor using single pulse TMS over the motor cortex and cerebellum. And that's really the moment for me where it really spiked the interest of tremor. So after med school, I really wanted to do a PhD, also with Rick, of course, also with Bas Bloom, and really try to understand the mechanisms of tremor in Parkinson's disease. And I think what is so specific about tremor is that it's so unique as compared to the other motor symptoms in Parkinson's disease. I would say that there are some very clear clinical differences that differentiate tremor from, for example, slowness of movement, like bradykinesia, or the stiffness, rigidity. For example, when you see the dopaminergic medication response, when you give people medication to upregulate their dopamine levels, that the response to dopamine in bradykinesia and rigidity is much better, much less variable as compared to tremor, which really sets tremor apart from those two. But also, during Parkinson's disease, as the disease progresses, what is interesting is that bradykinesia and rigidity, they often worsen during the disease course. They don't really get better. Whereas for tremor, this is actually quite variable. Tremor is an early symptom in PD, can be quite oftentimes the manifestation of the disease, and it often progresses at the beginning stages. But then afterwards, it can remain stable. And even in later stages of the disease, it can even regress or completely disappear. So that I found that super interesting. And the mechanisms of this progression weren't really known. And there was this big study done just during the time of my start of my PhD. They almost finished data collection. This was the Personalized Parkinson Project. It's a huge 2-year longitudinal cohort study of 520 patients with Parkinson's disease who got annual clinical measurements, for example, with MDS UPDRS to really capture their disease, their motor severity, but also structural and functional MRI. And this data set really allowed us to look at the progression of tremor as compared to the other symptoms, but also look at what might be the mechanisms. And around that same time, 2 very interesting articles came out, which were also published in the Movement Disorders Journal. One was really looking at the cortical thickness and subcortical volume, and the other one about the cerebellum, looking at huge data sets, hundreds and hundreds of MR scans, where they found some structural differences in key areas of the tremor circuitry, for example, in the thalamus and the cerebellum. So this really prompted us to look, okay, what really happens with tremor in our cohort? How does it progress or even regress maybe over time, and do, for example, structural changes in the brain that those previous papers found? Do longitudinal changes in those areas also correlate with tremor progression? So that is really the start of this paper. Yeah.
And what's for you the take-home message of the paper?
Well, I think the take-home message specifically is that there are actually 2. So the first one is more on a mechanistic basis. I would say that the longitudinal progression of tremor in PD is unique as compared to the other motor symptoms, such as bradykinesia and rigidity. So we really see that compared to the other, for example, bradykinesia rigidity, resting tremor remains stable, whereas postural and kinetic tremor reduce over time. And this is related to widespread cortical atrophy, the reduction of postural kinetic tremor. What we think is that this widespread atrophy, so this is the message, that widespread brain atrophy likely disrupts tremor-related processes in the central tremor oscillator somewhere in the brain, which leads to this reduction of tremor amplitude. The other one being is a clinical one, which is that these findings may have clinical implications. For instance, when patients have questions about their prognosis or when advanced therapies are considered, such as deep brain stimulation. But to really capture that, and I think that is also one of the most important take-home messages, is that more research is really needed to accurately predict tremor progression on an individual case-by-case basis, which may help clinicians also provide better care, personalized care specific to tremor, which is very difficult to already treat.
And what was for you the one unexpected thing that you learned from the research and from the publishing process?
Well, I found that was a very interesting question in the sense that this is really the first time that I, as a first author, published a full-length research article. I'm not meaning like a letter of observation, not a review, but really a full-length research article. So I really had to go through the review process. And what I learned specifically about that part is that review comments can be really helpful to getting a paper to really a higher level. We got some very critical, but also very good notes from the reviewers. And this also led us to do some very extensive additional analyses, but this also led to even better insights into our own results. And this even got a very prominent position in our paper. So even I know that the process can be tedious and sometimes difficult, I still think it's very good and it can help the paper also get to the next level.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very helpful tip also. It's a very nice note, I think, to end the interview. I would like to congratulate you and your coworkers again with this very nice research article, and we are already looking forward to follow-up papers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.